Somewhere between two rivers, in the flattest, dry stretch of land on Earth, a civilization built the first cities in human history. The first laws, the first written stories. Towers that scraped the sky by the standards of their time. And they did it without a single tree. Not many, not fewer than you'd think. None. Walk the banks of the Euphrates 4,000 years ago looking for timber, and you'd cross hundreds of miles of mud, reed, and blinding sun before finding a single usable log. So here's the real question. How do you build a civilization out of nothing? What do you do when the one resource every other ancient culture took for granted simply isn't there? The answer explains something about Mesopotamia that most people get completely backwards. Picture the geography first because it explains everything that follows. Southern Iraq today, ancient Sumer and Babylonia, is a floodplain. Flat, cracked, sun-baked earth stretching to the horizon in every direction. Cut by two slow brown rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. No forest, no mountains nearby. Just date palms scattered along the riverbanks. Trees that grow fruit beautifully but produce wood so soft and fibrous it splits if you look at it wrong. Every other early civilization had an obvious first move. Cut down trees, build with wood. In Mesopotamia, that move simply wasn't available. The nearest real forest, cedar, the kind of dense, rot-resistant timber you could actually build with, was hundreds of miles away, across mountains, in what's now Lebanon. So the first people to build cities on Earth had to answer an impossible question before they could build anything at all. What do you make a civilization out of when the ground gives you nothing but mud? The answer, it turns out, was under their feet the entire time. The Tigris and Euphrates didn't just provide water every flood season, they blanketed the land in a fresh layer of thick, workable clay. The Sumerians figured out that if you mixed that clay with straw, packed it into wooden molds, and left it to bake in the sun for a few days, you got something almost as strong as stone. A mud brick. It sounds primitive. It wasn't. Within a few centuries, Mesopotamians were mud brick engineering some of the tallest structures on Earth. Ziggurats, stepped temple towers rising over 100 feet into the desert sky, built entirely from sun-dried brick on the inside and a weatherproof shell of kiln-fired brick on the outside. And here's a detail that gets skipped. Sun-dried brick dissolves in rain. So they solved that problem too, by coating the outer walls in bitumen, a thick, tar-like substance that seeped naturally out of the ground in parts of Mesopotamia. It waterproofed the brick, sealed the joints, and turned mud into something that could survive for millennia. You can still see it today, holding together walls that are 4,000 years old. An entire architectural tradition, houses, palaces, temples, city walls stretching for miles, built almost entirely without a plank of wood in the frame. Just mud, straw, sun, and tar. But mud brick alone doesn't explain everything. Mesopotamians still needed roofs, doors, boats to move goods along the rivers. For that, they turned to a second resource that grew in real abundance in the south, where the rivers spread into vast marshlands. Reeds. Tall, dense, fast-growing stands of kasab reed, some of them thick as a human arm. Bundled tightly and lashed together, reeds became roof beams, wall lattices, entire houses. A building style so effective, the Marsh Arabs of southern Iraq were still constructing near-identical reed guest houses, called mudheefs, into the 20th century. Bundled differently, curved and sealed again with the same waterproofing bitumen, reeds became boats. Light, buoyant coracles that could carry grain, wool, and people up and down the rivers without a single wooden plank in the hull. And then there's the detail that connects all of this to the single most important invention in human history. When Sumerian scribes needed something to press wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets, to invent writing itself, they didn't carve a pen out of precious imported wood. They cut a reed, sharpened one end into a triangular tip, and pressed it into clay. Cuneiform, the first writing system on Earth, exists because a reed stalk from a Mesopotamian marsh happened to make a perfect stylus. The birth of written history runs through a plant that only grew there because there were no trees to shade it out. Mud and reed solved almost everything. Almost. There were things you could not build without genuine, solid timber. Ship masts, palace doors tall enough for a king to walk through, roof beams strong enough to span a real hall without sagging. For that, Mesopotamia had exactly one option: import it at enormous cost from very far away. Kings sent expeditions hundreds of miles north and west into the Zagros Mountains and across to the cedar forests of what's now Lebanon, to fell trees and float the logs back down the rivers on rafts. Royal inscriptions from Gudea of Lagash to Sargon of Akkad brag, unprompted, about hauling cedar logs back for a temple or a palace door, the ancient equivalent of bragging about importing marble. Wood wasn't just material, it was a status symbol so rare that Mesopotamian trade routes, tribute demands, and at least a few military campaigns were built around securing access to timber. It got mythologized. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving epic story on Earth, the hero doesn't travel to fight a monster for glory. He travels to the cedar forest guarded by the demon Humbaba, specifically to cut down trees and bring the wood home. Scholars have long suspected that story isn't really about a demon at all. It's a folk memory of exactly how desperate, dangerous, and important the search for real timber actually was. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. That absence of wood, the thing that should have crippled Mesopotamian civilization before it even started, may be the exact reason we know more about it today than almost any other ancient culture on Earth. Egyptian records were written on papyrus. Most of it rotted, burned, or crumbled within a few centuries. What survives is a fraction of what once existed. Most ancient cultures that wrote on wood, bark, or perishable material lost the overwhelming majority of their own history to time. Mesopotamians wrote on clay. Wet clay, pressed with a reed stylus, then left to dry, or better yet, accidentally baked hard in a house fire. Fired clay doesn't rot. It doesn't burn. It survives underground for thousands of years, intact, legible, waiting. Archaeologists have now recovered more than 500,000 cuneiform tablets, court records, shopping lists, love poems, tax receipts, contracts, and yes, one of the earliest known complaint letters from a customer furious about bad quality copper. We can read Mesopotamian daily life in more granular detail than almost any other ancient civilization, precisely because they never had the wood to write on anything else. They had no forest, no timber, nothing to build with except river mud, marsh reed, and stubborn ingenuity. And they built the first cities, the first laws, and the first written words in human history anyway. If a civilization with literally nothing at hand could build all of that, maybe scarcity was never really the obstacle people assume it is,